The surface we know. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of London on a quiet evening, when the crowds have thinned and the city has softened into that gentle hush that falls between day and night. The sky above you is painted in shades of dusky blue and amber, the last light of the sun catching the edges of clouds that drift lazily toward the horizon. You are standing in Trafalgar Square, one of the most famous public spaces in the world. And yet in this moment, it feels almost intimate, almost secret, as though the city has drawn a breath and is holding it just for you. Beneath your feet, the ground is solid and reassuring. Stone slabs, worn smooth by countless footsteps over nearly 2 centuries, stretch out in every direction. You can feel the coolness of the evening rising up through them, a gentle reminder that summer is fading and autumn is beginning to whisper its arrival. Around you, the square opens wide, generous and unhurried, inviting you to linger rather than rush through. To your left, the fountains murmur softly, their waters catching the last golden light and scattering it into 1,000 tiny fragments. The sound is soothing, a continuous, gentle ripple that seems to wash away the noise and hurry of the day. Pigeons, those eternal residents of the square, are settling down for the evening, cooing quietly to one another as they find their roosting places along the ledges and parapets. They have been here for generations, these birds, their ancestors witnesses to moments of history that now exist only in books and memories. And rising above it all, impossibly tall and steadfast, stands Nelson's column. You tilt your head back and let your gaze travel upward, past the bronze reliefs at the base that depict naval battles fought long ago, past the smooth granite shaft that reaches toward the heavens, until your eyes rest upon the figure at the very top. Admiral Horatio Nelson, cast in bronze, stands with his back to the palace and his face toward the sea he loved, though the sea is many miles away. He has stood here since 1843, watching over this square and the city beyond, a silent guardian frozen in time from where you stand. He seems impossibly small against the vastness of the sky, and yet you know that up close, that statue is enormous, over 5 meters tall, depicting a man who changed the course of history with his courage and his sacrifice. There is something both comforting and melancholy about his presence. This eternal sentinel who will never leave his post, who will never grow old, who will never know how the world has changed around him. You take a slow breath and let your shoulders relax. The air smells faintly of rain, though the clouds have not yet decided whether to release their burden. There is a hint of exhaust from the buses that rumble along the edges of the square. And beneath that, something older, something you cannot quite name. It is the smell of a city that has been lived in for thousands of years, a layering of stone and smoke and humanity that has seeped into the very earth. As you stand here, you might notice the tourists taking photographs, capturing Nelson and the lions and the fountains to carry home as souvenirs of their visit. You might see Londoners cutting through the square on their way somewhere else, barely glancing at the monuments they have passed 100 times before. You might hear the distant chime of a church bell or the rumble of the underground far below your feet. All of this is the surface life of Trafalgar Square, the visible and familiar layer that millions of people experience every year. But what if you were to pause, just for a moment, and ask a different question? What if you were to look not up at Nelson or out at the fountains, but down beneath your feet into the earth that holds this square in place? What secrets might be sleeping there in the darkness below the stone? This is an invitation to wonder, and wondering is a gentle thing. It does not demand answers immediately. It simply opens a door and invites you to step through when you are ready. So let us step through together, slowly and softly, and see what lies beneath this famous ground. You see, Trafalgar Square, as you know it today, is relatively young as London landmarks go. It was created in the 1830s and 1840s, designed to be a grand public space celebrating British naval power and national pride. Before that, this patch of earth had a very different character, a very different purpose. And before that, stretching back through centuries and millennia, this land held other stories entirely, stories that have been buried and forgotten and paved over, but never truly erased. The ground beneath your feet is not simply dirt and rock. It is a record, a layered archive of everything that has ever happened here. Every building that has stood and fallen, every person who has walked and lived and died, every creature that has roamed this landscape in ages so distant they seem almost mythical, all of it has left traces in the earth. Archaeologists call these layers stratigraphy, but you might think of them as pages in a book, each one recording a different chapter of an endlessly unfolding story. And what a story it is! If you could peel back those layers, one by one, you would find yourself traveling not just through space, but through time. You would move from the present moment with its buses and cameras and pigeons, back through the centuries of British history, past wars and plagues and kings and queens, past the building of this square and the demolition of what came before, past medieval markets and Tudor palaces, past Roman settlements and ancient tribal lands, until you reached a time so remote that London did not exist, that humans had not yet arrived, that the landscape itself was unrecognizable in those deepest layers. You would find evidence of a world that seems impossible now. You would find the bones of animals that no longer roam this island, creatures that belonged to a warmer age when the Thames was a broad, slow river winding through lush forests and open grasslands. You would find the marks of rivers that have long since vanished, buried beneath the growing city-like veins, hidden beneath skin. You would find, in short, an entirely different world, sleeping quietly beneath the one you know. But let us not rush ahead. The beauty of this journey is in its slowness, in allowing each layer to reveal itself in its own time. For now, it is enough to stand here in the gathering dusk and feel the weight of all that hidden history beneath your feet. It is enough to know that this square, so solid and permanent seeming, is only the latest chapter in a story that stretches back further than the mind can easily grasp. The fountains continue their gentle song. The pigeons settle into sleep. Nelson keeps his eternal watch. And beneath it all, the earth holds its secrets, patient and silent, waiting for those who care to listen. As you stand here, perhaps you feel a flicker of curiosity, a gentle pull to know more. That is a good feeling, a warm feeling, the kind of feeling that leads to discovery and understanding. There is no hurry. The history beneath Trafalgar Square has waited for thousands of years, and it will wait a little longer still. So let us begin our journey downward, not with pickaxes and shovels, but with imagination and wonder. Let us peel back the layers of time together, gently and carefully, and see what stories emerge from the darkness. Let us discover what lies beneath. The evening deepens around you. The first stars are beginning to appear in the gaps between clouds. The city hums its quiet nighttime song, a lullaby of distant traffic and murmured conversations, and the soft sigh of wind through the trees that line the square. You are here, in this moment, connected to everything that has come before and everything that will come after. And now, if you are ready, let us take our first step into the past. Let us leave the surface behind, just for a little while, and descend into the hidden world beneath Trafalgar Square. There are stories waiting there, stories of kings and commoners, of creatures and rivers, of transformation and loss and memory. They are your stories too, in a way, because they belong to this place that you are standing in, this patch of earth that has seen so much and held so many lives. Close your eyes if you wish. Breathe slowly and deeply, and when you are ready, let us go together into the gentle darkness of history, where the past is always waiting, patient and kind, to share its secrets with those who take the time to listen. Before the square, a royal stable yard, let us step backward through time now, leaving behind the grand open space of the square, and entering a world that has been forgotten by all but the most devoted students of history. The year is perhaps 1500 and something. The exact date does not matter so much as the feeling of this place, the texture of daily life that once filled this patch of London earth. You are no longer standing in Trafalgar Square, because Trafalgar Square does not yet exist. Instead, you find yourself in the King's Mews, the royal stables, a place of work and duty, and the warm, earthy presence of animals. The first thing you notice is the smell. It is not unpleasant, not exactly, but it is strong and unmistakable. There is the rich, grassy scent of hay piled high in the storage lofts above your head. There is the sharp tang of horse sweat and the deeper, mustier odor of the stables themselves, wood and leather and animal warmth mingling together into something that speaks of life and labor. Beneath it all, there is the smell of London itself. Smoke from thousands of chimneys, the river not far away, the general closeness of a city where people and animals live side by side in quarters that would seem impossibly cramped to modern eyes. You are standing in a courtyard, cobblestones beneath your feet that are worn smooth by the passage of countless hooves and boots and cartwheels. Around you rise the buildings of the Mews, sturdy structures of timber and brick that house the king's horses and the men who care for them. The roofs are steeply pitched, covered in tiles that have weathered to a soft gray brown. Windows are small and few, designed more to keep out the cold than to let in light. This is a functional place, built for purpose rather than beauty. And yet there is a kind of honest dignity to it that the grand monuments of later centuries will never quite capture. The word mews itself tells a story. It comes from the French word moeur, meaning to molt or to change, because this place was originally home not to horses but to hawks. In the earlier medieval period, when kings and nobles hunted with falcons as a mark of their status and power, the royal hawks were kept here during their molting season, that vulnerable time when they shed their old feathers and grew new ones. The birds required careful attention during this period. A quiet place, away from disturbance, where they could complete their transformation in peace. Imagine those earlier centuries, when the muse was filled not with the stamping of hooves, but with the rustle of feathers and the sharp, wild cries of hunting birds. Falconers moved through these buildings with the quiet confidence of men who understood their charges intimately, who knew each bird by its temperament, who could read the subtle signs of health or illness in a way that seemed almost magical to outsiders. The hawks were valuable beyond measure, prized possessions of the crown, and the men who cared for them held positions of real importance in the royal household. But times changed, as times always do. The fashion for falconry faded, replaced by other pursuits, and the mews gradually transformed into stables for the king's horses. By the Tudor period, this was where the royal carriages were kept, the magnificent vehicles that carried monarchs through the streets of London on occasions of state. The horses that pulled those carriages were themselves creatures of considerable value, carefully bred and trained, groomed until their coats shone like silk. Let yourself drift into this world for a moment. Imagine you are a groom in the king's mews, rising before dawn to begin your work. The city is still quiet, the streets empty, except for the occasional watchman or early baker heading to fire up the ovens. You make your way through the dim corridors of the stable, a lantern in your hand casting long shadows on the walls. The horses stir at your approach, nickering softly in recognition. They know you, these animals. They know the sound of your footsteps, the particular way you move, the gentleness of your hands when you check their legs for heat or swelling. Your first task is to bring them water, bucket after heavy bucket drawn from the well in the courtyard. Then comes the feeding, measures of oats and hay distributed according to each horse's needs. Some are working horses who will pull carriages today, and they need fuel for their labor. Others are resting, recovering from a journey, or waiting for their next duty, and they receive a lighter ration. You know each animal's requirements as well as you know your own, because this is your life. This is what you have done since you were a boy, and there is a kind of peace in the rhythm of it. As the morning brightens, the mews comes alive with activity. Other grooms arrive, along with farriers and saddlers and coachmen, each with their own tasks and responsibilities. There is the ring of hammer on anvil as a horse is shod, the creak of leather as harnesses are checked and adjusted, the low murmur of conversation as men share news and gossip from the city beyond these walls. This is a community, a world unto itself, and though you serve the king, your daily life is shaped more by the needs of the animals in your care than by the distant dramas of the court. Sometimes, on days of great ceremony, you catch a glimpse of the larger world your work supports. You help harness the finest horses to the grandest carriages, brushing their coats until they gleam, braiding their manes with ribbons in the royal colors. You watch as the procession forms up in the courtyard, the coachmen in their livery, the outriders on their mounts, the guards with their polished weapons, and then they sweep out through the gates into the streets of London, where crowds have gathered to cheer and gawk and catch a glimpse of majesty. But you do not follow. Your place is here, in the mews, with the horses that remain and the endless work that waits to be done. There are stalls to muck out, tack to clean, hooves to pick, 100 small tasks that keep this place running smoothly. It is not glamorous work, but it is honest, and there is satisfaction in doing it well as the day wears on. The light shifts through the small windows, moving across the walls in slow golden bars. The smells of the stable settle into a familiar background, barely noticed anymore. The sounds become a kind of music, the stamp and shuffle of hooves, the occasional whinny, the clink of buckles and bits. You move through your tasks with the ease of long practice, your body knowing what to do, even when your mind wanders elsewhere. Perhaps you think of your family, a wife and children in a small house not far from here, waiting for you to return at the end of the day. Perhaps you think of the future, wondering if your son might follow you into this trade, learning the ways of horses as you learned them from your own father. Perhaps you think of nothing at all, letting the rhythm of work carry you along like a gentle current. The muse has stood here for generations, and it feels as permanent as the earth itself. You cannot imagine this place ever changing, ever being swept away to make room for something else. And yet, in the centuries to come, that is exactly what will happen. The stables will be demolished, the ground cleared, and a grand new square will rise in their place, a square named for a battle fought at sea, a square dominated by a column honoring an admiral who has not yet been born. But you know nothing of this future. You know only the present, the warm breath of horses, the weight of the water bucket in your hand, the particular quality of light on an autumn afternoon in the King's Mews. And that is enough. That is more than enough. As evening falls, you finish your work and prepare to leave. The horses are fed and watered, their stalls clean, their needs attended to. Tomorrow you will return and do it all again, as you have done for years, as you will continue to do for years to come. This is your life, simple and steady, a single thread in the vast tapestry of history that is being woven all around you. You step out into the courtyard and pause for a moment, looking up at the sky. The first stars are appearing, faint pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. Somewhere in the city, a bell is ringing, calling the faithful to evening prayers. The air is cool on your face, carrying the promise of frost, and beneath your feet, the cobblestones hold the memory of every step that has ever crossed them, every hoof and wheel and boot, a record written in wear and weathering that will one day be buried beneath newer stones, newer stories, newer lives. But for now, in this moment, the muse is alive and real and yours. If you have ever visited Trafalgar Square and wondered what stood there before the column and the fountains and the lions, now you know. It was this, a working stable, a place of duty and care, where men tended animals in service of the crown. It was humble and essential, and though it has been erased from the landscape, it has never truly disappeared. It sleeps beneath the surface, waiting to be remembered. The Georgian transformation let us move forward now through the years, watching the seasons turn and the centuries pass like pages in a great book. The King's Mews has grown old, its buildings weathered and worn, patched and repaired so many times that little of the original structure remains. The horses still stamp in their stalls, the grooms still rise before dawn to tend them. But the world beyond these walls is changing, and change has a way of sweeping everything before it, even things that seem as permanent as stone. The year is 1820-something, and a new vision is taking shape in the minds of powerful men. King George IV sits on the throne, a monarch with expensive tastes and grand ambitions, determined to remake London into a city worthy of the empire it commands. He has commissioned an architect named John Nash to transform the heart of the capital, to create boulevards and squares and monuments that will rival anything in Paris or Rome. And one of the sites chosen for this transformation is the Old Mews, this patch of ground where hawks once molted and horses still stand, unknowing, in their stalls. Imagine yourself as a worker on this great project, one of the hundreds of laborers who will spend years turning a vision into reality. You are young, perhaps strong-backed and willing, drawn to London from a village in the countryside by the promise of steady wages. You have never seen anything like this city, its crowds and noise and endless motion, and the scale of the work you have been hired to do fills you with a mixture of excitement and dread. The first task is demolition. Before anything new can be built, the old must be swept away. You arrive at the Mews on a gray morning, mist hanging low over the rooftops, and join a crew of men armed with pickaxes and crowbars and sheer determination. The horses have been moved elsewhere, the grooms reassigned, the buildings emptied of everything that could be salvaged or sold. What remains are empty shells, timber frames and brick walls that have stood for centuries, and it is your job to bring them down. There is something both exhilarating and sorrowful about demolition. Each swing of the pickaxe sends vibrations up through your arms and into your shoulders. Each crash of falling masonry raises clouds of dust that coat your skin and fill your lungs. You are erasing history, you realize, wiping away the traces of lives that were lived here, work that was done here, moments of joy and sorrow and ordinary routine that will never be recovered. And yet you are also making room for something new, clearing the ground for a future that does not yet exist but soon will. The work takes months. Walls that took years to build come down in days, but the rubble must be cleared, the ground must be leveled, the foundations of the old buildings must be dug out and carted away. You develop calluses on your hands and an ache in your back that never quite fades. You learn the names of the men who work beside you, share meals with them, hear their stories. Some are Londoners born and bred, others are immigrants from Ireland or the countryside, all of them drawn here by the same need to earn a living, to feed their families, to survive. And slowly, gradually, the site begins to take shape. Where once there were stables and courtyards, now there is open ground, a blank canvas waiting for the architect's vision to be realized. John Nash walks the site from time to time, a well-dressed gentleman who seems to float above the mud and chaos, pointing and directing and imagining things you cannot see. He speaks of colonnades and fountains, of vistas and proportions, of a square that will be the heart of the nation. You nod and return to your work, not quite understanding, but trusting that he knows what he is doing. The construction that follows is even more demanding than the demolition. Great blocks of granite are hauled into place, cut and shaped by skilled masons whose expertise seems almost magical. You watch them work, these craftsmen, their chisels dancing across the stone with a precision that leaves you breathless. They are creating something beautiful out of raw rock, something that will stand for centuries. And though your own contribution is humbler, carrying materials, mixing mortar, doing the 1,000 small tasks that keep the project moving, you feel a quiet pride in being part of it. The square takes years to complete. You watch the terraces rise along the northern edge, elegant buildings with tall windows and classical facades. You watch the roadways being laid, smooth surfaces replacing the rutted paths of the old mews. You watch the fountains being installed, great basins of stone that will one day catch the light and scatter it like jewels. And at the center of it all, the foundation is prepared for a monument that will dominate the square. A column dedicated to a hero who died at sea nearly 40 years ago. Admiral Horatio Nelson is a name that stirs deep feelings in the hearts of your countrymen. He was the victor of the Battle of Trafalgar, the engagement that secured British naval supremacy and ended the threat of French invasion. He was also a casualty of that battle, struck down by a sniper's bullet at the moment of his greatest triumph, dying in the arms of his officers as the guns still roared round him. His death made him immortal, a symbol of sacrifice and glory that the nation has never forgotten. The column being raised in his honor is immense, one of the tallest structures in London, a shaft of granite crowned with a bronze statue that will gaze out over the city for eternity. You watch as the pieces are assembled, each massive stone hoisted into place by cranes and pulleys and the sheer muscle of men like yourself. It is dangerous work, and more than once you see accidents, injuries, moments when the weight of stone and the limits of human strength come into terrible collision. But the work continues, because it must, because this is what you have been hired to do, because the vision of powerful men demands completion. And what of the ground beneath all this new construction? What of the layers of history that were disturbed when the old mews was torn down and the new square was built? The workers of that era did not think much about such things. Archaeology, as we know it today, did not yet exist. When bones or artifacts were uncovered, they were usually discarded or ignored, treated as rubbish rather than relics. No one thought to ask what stories those fragments might tell, what lives they might represent, and yet the earth remembers. Beneath the new foundations, beneath the carefully laid paving stones, beneath the fountains and the column and all the grandeur of the Georgian square, the older layers remain. They are compressed and disturbed, jumbled and buried, but they are there. The bones of medieval horses, perhaps lying alongside the foundations of long-vanished buildings. Fragments of pottery and glass, dropped and forgotten by people whose names were never recorded. And deeper still, things much older, things that would not be discovered or understood for many years to come. You do not know any of this, of course. You know only the ache in your muscles and the weight of the stone and the satisfaction of watching something magnificent take shape before your eyes. When the square is finally completed, when the fountains begin to flow and the crowds gather to marvel at what has been created, you feel a quiet pride that stays with you for the rest of your life. You helped build this. You were part of something larger than yourself, something that will endure long after you are gone, and in time you are gone. The Georgian era gives way to the Victorian, and the Victorian to the Edwardian, and on through the tumultuous 20th century and into the 21st. Trafalgar Square becomes one of the most famous landmarks in the world, a gathering place for celebrations and protests, for tourists and locals, for pigeons and performers. Millions of people walk across its stones, never thinking about the workers who laid them, the stables that once stood here, the layers of history sleeping beneath their feet. But the history is there, patient and silent, waiting to be remembered. And tonight, in the quiet of your imagination, you are remembering. You are honoring the men who swung pickaxes and carried stones, who transformed a working stable into a national monument, who built something beautiful on top of something humble and never thought to ask what might be lost in the process. This is how places change. This is how history is made, not only by admirals and architects, but by ordinary people doing ordinary work. Their names unrecorded, their faces forgotten, their contributions buried beneath the very stones they laid. They deserve to be remembered, even if we cannot remember them by name. They deserve our gratitude and our wonder, and the gentle attention of a quiet evening's reflection. Bones and beasts, prehistoric discoveries. Now let us descend deeper still, past the Georgian foundations, past the medieval muse, past everything that human hands have built, into a realm of time so vast and strange that the mind struggles to comprehend it. We are no longer speaking of centuries now, but of millennia, of hundreds of thousands of years, of an age when this island was unrecognizable and the creatures that roamed it belonged to a world that seems more like a dream than a reality. Imagine the surprise of the workers and engineers who, in the course of various construction projects over the years, have driven their shovels into the earth beneath Trafalgar Square and struck something unexpected. Not the foundations of old buildings, not the fragments of pottery or glass that speak of human habitation, but bones, large bones, bones that clearly did not belong to horses or dogs or any animal familiar to the streets of London. Bones that raised questions no one was prepared to answer. The discoveries have been remarkable. Beneath this ground, buried in layers of gravel and clay deposited by ancient rivers, archaeologists and construction crews have found the remains of creatures that seem utterly impossible in this context. Hippopotamus bones. Yes, hippopotamus, those massive barrel-bodied animals that we associate with African rivers, wallowing in warm waters beneath a tropical sun. And yet here they are, or rather, here they were, in London, in the very place where tourists now pose for photographs and children chase pigeons. Close your eyes and let your mind travel back to that distant age. The ice ages have come and gone again. Great glaciers advancing and retreating across the land like slow tides of frozen water. In the warm periods between these glacial advances, the climate of Britain was very different from what we know today. Temperatures were higher, sometimes significantly so, and the landscape was lush and green, covered in forests and grasslands that supported a remarkable diversity of wildlife. The Thames was there, but it was not the tamed, embanked river that flows through modern London. It was a broad, braided waterway, splitting into multiple channels that wandered across a wide floodplain. Its banks were lined with reeds and willows, and its waters were home to fish and waterfowl and creatures that came to drink and bathe in the shallows. This was a wild river, untouched by human hands, following its own ancient course through a landscape that had no cities, no roads, no fences or walls of any kind. And along those banks, in the warm periods when the ice had retreated to the far north, the hippopotamuses came. They waded into the water just as their descendants do today in Africa, submerging their massive bodies to escape the heat, their ears and nostrils and eyes breaking the surface like small islands of flesh. They grazed on the lush vegetation that grew along the riverbanks, their huge jaws crushing plants with methodical efficiency. They were at home here, in this warm and welcoming land, and they left their bones behind when they died. Bones that would be buried and preserved and eventually discovered beneath the bustle of a city that could never have been imagined. But the hippopotamuses were not alone. The excavations beneath Trafalgar Square and the surrounding area have also yielded the bones of lions, not the heraldic lions that guard Nelson's column, cast in bronze and frozen forever in poses of noble vigilance, but real lions. Flesh and blood predators that once hunted across this landscape. They were not quite the same as modern African lions, these ancient British cats, but they were close cousins, powerful and magnificent, the apex predators of their world. Imagine them padding through the grasslands that once covered this ground, their tawny coats rippling over muscles built for speed and strength. Imagine their eyes scanning the herds of prey animals that grazed in the distance, calculating distances and angles, waiting for the right moment to launch an attack. Imagine the sound of their roars echoing across the land in the twilight, a sound that would have sent shivers down the spine of any creature that heard it. A sound that has not been heard in Britain for over 10,000 years. And there were elephants, too, or rather their ancient relatives, creatures with tusks and trunks that would have been familiar in their general form, but strange in their specific details. The straight-tusked elephant roamed these lands during the warm interglacial periods. A massive animal that browsed on trees and shrubs, shaping the landscape with its appetite, just as elephants do today in Africa and Asia. Its bones have been found in the gravels beneath London, testimony to a world that seems almost mythical from our modern perspective. What would it have been like to stand on this spot, in that unimaginably distant time, and look out across the landscape? You would have seen no buildings, no roads, no trace of human presence at all. The earliest humans had not yet arrived in Britain, or if they had, they were few and scattered, leaving little trace of their passing. The land belonged to the animals, to the great beasts that roamed and hunted and lived out their lives according to rhythms that had nothing to do with calendars or clocks. The sky above would have been the same sky, more or less, the same sun and moon and stars wheeling through their eternal courses. The seasons would have turned, spring to summer, to autumn to winter, each bringing its own changes to the land. But the details would have been utterly alien. The plants, the animals, the very shape of the rivers and hills all would have been different, part of an ecosystem that has long since vanished, leaving only bones and stones and faint traces in the earth. It is a strange and wonderful thing to contemplate, this deep history that lies beneath our feet. We walk through cities that seem so permanent, so solid, so obviously the product of human intention and effort, and we forget that they are only the thinnest veneer on top of a story that stretches back millions of years. The ground remembers what we have forgotten. The earth holds secrets that we are only beginning to understand, and there is something comforting in this knowledge, something that puts our own brief lives into perspective. The hippopotamuses that wallowed in the ancient Thames did not know that their world would one day vanish, replaced by ice and then by entirely different landscapes and climates. The lions that hunted across these grasslands did not know that their descendants would one day be confined to distant continents, remembered in Britain only through bones and stories. They lived their lives, generation after generation, and then they were gone, and the world moved on without them. We too will one day be gone. The cities we have built will crumble or be replaced by structures we cannot imagine. The ground beneath Trafalgar Square will continue to accumulate new layers, new stories, new secrets for future generations to discover. And perhaps, thousands or millions of years from now, some being we cannot conceive will dig down through those layers and find the traces of our world, just as we have found the traces of the hippopotamus and the lion and the elephant. But that is a thought for another time. For now, let us simply rest in the wonder of what has been discovered. The astonishing fact that beneath one of the busiest squares in one of the busiest cities in the world, there lie the bones of creatures from a vanished age. Let us honor those ancient animals who knew nothing of us, and yet whose presence here speaks to something profound about the nature of time and change and the perdurance of life in all its forms. The fossils have been carefully collected and studied, placed in museum collections where they can be examined and understood. Scientists have analyzed them, determined their ages, reconstructed the environments in which they lived, and through their work we can glimpse, however dimly, that lost world beneath our feet. We can imagine the hippopotamus breaking the surface of the ancient Thames, water streaming from its massive head. We can imagine the lion crouching in the tall grass, eyes fixed on its prey. We can imagine a world without humans, wild and complete and utterly indifferent to anything we might think or feel or desire. This is the gift of deep history, perspective. It reminds us that the world does not belong to us, that it has existed for vast stretches of time without us, and will continue to exist long after we are gone. It invites humility and wonder, and a kind of peace that comes from knowing our true place in the grand sweep of time. So rest now in the knowledge of what lies beneath. Rest with the bones of the hippopotamus, the lion, the elephant, sleeping in the ancient gravels beneath Trafalgar Square. They have been there for hundreds of thousands of years, patient and silent, and they will be there still when morning comes. The river that vanished beneath the stones and bones, beneath the foundations and fossils. There is something else hidden under Trafalgar Square and the surrounding streets of London. It is something you cannot see or touch, something that has been buried so thoroughly that most people have forgotten it ever existed. And yet, if you press your ear to the ground on a very quiet night, if you use your imagination to filter out the rumble of the underground and the hum of the city, you might almost hear it, the sound of water flowing in darkness, following a course it has followed for thousands of years. You are listening for a ghost, the ghost of a river. London is built on rivers. Everyone knows the Thames, that great silver serpent that winds through the heart of the city, spanned by bridges, lined with landmarks, celebrated in song and story. But the Thames was never alone. It was fed by tributaries, smaller rivers and streams that flowed down from the hills and valleys surrounding the city, carrying rainwater and spring water to join the main channel on its journey to the sea. And most of these tributaries have vanished, buried beneath the growing city, channeled into underground culverts and sewers. their names forgotten by all but the most dedicated historians and geographers. The area around Trafalgar Square was once touched by these waters. The exact course of the streams is difficult to trace now, obscured by centuries of construction and reconstruction, but the evidence is there if you know where to look. Old maps show watercourses that no longer exist. Place names hint at the presence of water, wells, and springs and fords that were once landmarks in a much smaller settlement. The ground itself, when excavated, reveals layers of riverine sediment, gravels and silts deposited by flowing water in ages past. Imagine yourself as a medieval Londoner, living in the centuries before the city swelled to its present enormity. You would have known these waters intimately. Perhaps there was a stream near your home where you drew water for drinking and cooking, where you washed your clothes and watered your animals. Perhaps you crossed a small bridge on your daily errands, barely noticing the water that gurgled beneath it because it was so familiar, so ordinary, so much a part of the background of your life. The streams were not always pleasant. In a city without modern sanitation, waterways became receptacles for waste of every kind. The smell could be overpowering, especially in summer, and the water was often unsafe to drink without boiling. But the streams were also useful, powering mills and providing water for industries that depended on a steady supply. They were woven into the fabric of daily life, as essential as the streets and buildings that lined their banks. As the centuries passed and London grew, the streams became inconvenient. They flooded in heavy rains, turning streets into rivers of mud. They carried disease in their polluted waters. They took up space that could be put to more profitable use. And so, one by one, they were buried. Brick culverts were constructed to contain them, channeling their waters underground and out of sight. Streets were paved over the top, buildings erected on what had once been riverbanks. The streams became invisible, lost to memory, flowing in darkness beneath the feet of people who never knew they were there. This is the fate of the rivers. Beneath Trafalgar Square, they still flow, or at least the water that once fed them still makes its way through the underground channels and into the Thames. But they are no longer rivers in any meaningful sense. They are infrastructure, part of the vast hidden network of pipes and tunnels that keeps the modern city functioning. No one swims in them, or fishes in them, or washes clothes on their banks. They exist only as water, doing what water does, finding its way downhill toward the sea. And yet there is something poignant about these lost rivers. Something that speaks to the way cities transform the landscapes they occupy. A river is a living thing, in a sense, constantly changing, carving new channels, depositing sediment, supporting ecosystems of plants and animals and microorganisms. When you bury a river, you do not kill it exactly, but you take away its wildness, its capacity for change, its connection to the larger cycles of weather and season that govern the natural world. Imagine yourself descending into the darkness beneath Trafalgar Square, following the path of the vanished water. The air is damp and cool, carrying a faint mineral smell that speaks of deep earth and hidden places. The walls around you are brick, old brick, stained with the residue of centuries of flow. Your footsteps echo in the confined space, and beneath that sound, you can hear the water itself, a continuous murmur that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. This is what remains of the river. This is its afterlife, its existence as a ghost, flowing through tunnels that were built to contain it but can never quite silence it. The water does not know or care that it has been buried. It simply flows, as it has always flowed, obeying the laws of gravity and motion that govern all water everywhere. It is patient in a way that humans can never be, content to follow its course through darkness, for as long as the tunnels hold, for as long as there is rain to feed it, for as long as the earth endures. There is something comforting about this persistence, this quiet endurance. The river does not rage against its confinement or mourn its lost freedom. It simply continues, adapting to the circumstances it finds itself in, finding its way through obstacles and around barriers, always moving, always seeking the lowest point, the path of least resistance, the sea that waits at the end of every river's journey above you. The life of the city goes on, oblivious to the water flowing beneath. Tourists take photographs of Nelson's Column. Office workers hurry to meetings. Street performers gather crowds with their tricks and music. None of them think about the river, the ghost river, the buried water that connects this place to a past when London was smaller and wilder and the streams ran free through meadows and marshes that have long since been paved over and built upon. But you are thinking about it now. You are remembering the river, honoring it with your attention, acknowledging its presence even though it has been hidden from sight for centuries. This is a kind of magic, the magic of imagination and memory, the ability to see beyond the surface of things to the deeper layers beneath. And perhaps, in some small way, the river knows. Perhaps the water carries with it some trace of the attention you are paying, some vibration of gratitude and recognition that ripples outward through the darkness, touching the ancient stones, the buried bones, the roots of trees in distant parks that still drink from the hidden flow. Perhaps the act of remembering is itself a kind of gift, a way of keeping the river alive in the only way that matters now. The sound of the water is soothing if you let it be. It is the sound of continuity, of connection, of the endless cycle of evaporation and condensation, rain and river, fresh water and salt sea. It has been flowing since long before there were humans to hear it, and it will be flowing still when the last human city has crumbled to dust and the land returns to whatever form it will take in the ages to come. Let the sound carry you now, as you rest in the quiet of this moment. Let it wash over you like the water washes over the stones in the darkness below Trafalgar Square. Let it remind you that beneath the busy surface of the world, there are depths and mysteries that we can only glimpse, currents and flows that connect us to the past and the future in ways we barely understand. The river that vanished is still there, still flowing, still faithful to its ancient course. And you, lying here in the stillness of the night, are connected to it, part of the same great cycle of water and life that encompasses the whole planet. Rest now and let the river carry you gently into sleep. The forgotten church of St. Martin. Let us rise now from the hidden waters and return to the surface, though not to the bright bustle of the modern square. Instead, let us pause in the shadows at the edge of Trafalgar Square, where an old church stands like a patient guardian, watching over the comings and goings of the city as it has done for centuries. This is St. Martin in the Fields, and its name alone tells a story of how much this place has changed in the fields. When the first church was built on this spot, sometime in the medieval period, it stood not in the heart of a great city but on the outskirts of a much smaller settlement. London was contained within its ancient walls, a compact huddle of streets and buildings clustered along the north bank of the Thames. Beyond those walls lay fields and farms, orchards and meadows, the countryside that supplied the city with food and fuel. And here, in those fields, a church was built to serve the people who lived and worked in this rural landscape. Imagine yourself as one of those medieval parishioners, walking to church on a Sunday morning in an age when the rhythms of life were governed by the bells that rang out from the steeple. The path takes you through open land, past hedgerows thick with birds, past fields where crops are growing or lying fallow, past the occasional cottage where your neighbors live their quiet lives. The city is visible in the distance, a smudge of smoke and rooftops, but it feels far away, part of another world. Your world is here, in the parish of St. Martin, in the community of souls who gather each week to pray and sing and affirm their place in the great chain of being that links heaven to earth. The church itself is modest by later standards, a simple structure of stone and timber with a square tower that serves as a landmark visible for miles around. Inside, the walls are painted with images of saints and biblical scenes, colors that seem impossibly bright in the dim light that filters through the small windows. The air smells of incense and candle wax, of damp stone, and the faint mustiness of old wood. You take your place among your neighbors, heads bowed, hearts lifted, joining in the prayers that have been spoken here for generations. When you die, as everyone must, you hope to be buried in the churchyard, that sacred ground where your ancestors rest and where your descendants will one day join you. The soil of the churchyard is thick with the bones of the faithful, generation upon generation, laid to rest in the shadow of the steeple. Their graves marked with simple stones that will weather and fade over the centuries until the names carved upon them are illegible, forgotten, lost to time. This is the way of things in a medieval parish. Birth, baptism, marriage, death, burial take place within the embrace of the church, each milestone marked by ritual and witnessed by the community. The church is not just a building, but the center of communal life, the place where news is shared and disputes are settled, where the great events of the wider world are announced and interpreted, where the cycles of the agricultural year are blessed and celebrated. But time passes and the city grows. What was once countryside becomes suburb, and what was suburb becomes city center. The fields around St. Martin disappear beneath streets and buildings, and the church that was once isolated in rural tranquility finds itself surrounded by the noise and bustle of an expanding metropolis. The population grows, and the church grows with it, rebuilt and enlarged to accommodate the swelling congregation. The medieval building is replaced by a grander structure, which is itself replaced by the church that stands today, an elegant Georgian edifice designed by the architect James Gibbs and completed in And what of the medieval churchyard, with its generations of the faithful resting in the soil? Much of it has been built over, absorbed into the expanding footprint of the church and the surrounding streets. The bones remain, for the most part, undisturbed beneath the foundations and pavements, a hidden cemetery that few people know exists. When construction projects have disturbed this ground, workers have sometimes found them fragments of skeleton, shards of coffin wood, the occasional corroded coin or piece of jewelry placed with the dead as a token of remembrance. These are ordinary people, for the most part. They are not the kings and queens whose tombs draw tourists to Westminster Abbey, not the famous writers and scientists honored in the great churches of the realm. They are the nameless majority, the men and women and children who lived and died in this parish over the course of many centuries, whose stories were never recorded because no one thought them worth recording. They were farmers and servants, shopkeepers and laborers, mothers and fathers and grandparents who loved and grieved and hoped and feared just as we do today. And now they sleep beneath the stones of Trafalgar Square and the streets around it, their resting places unmarked, their names forgotten, their lives absorbed into the anonymous flow of history. When you walk across the square, you are walking above them. When you stand at the foot of Nelson's column and gaze up at the Admiral's bronze figure, you are standing in what was once sacred ground, a place set apart for the dead. This is not a sad thought, or at least it need not be. The dead do not mind our footsteps. They are beyond caring about such things, if indeed they ever cared at all. But there is something humbling about the knowledge that we share this space with those who came before us, that the ground we walk on has been walked on by countless others whose lives were just as real and vivid and important to them as ours are to us. In a city as old as London, this is true almost everywhere. The layers of the dead are part of the fabric of the place, a sediment of humanity that underlies everything we see and do. We build on top of them, quite literally, our foundations sunk into soil that contains their bones. We carry on the work they began, continuing the story of this city, this nation, this species, one generation handing the torch to the next in an endless relay that stretches back to the beginning of human time. St. Martin in Fields still stands, still serves as a parish church, still welcomes worshippers and visitors through its doors. It has adapted to the changing times, as all living institutions must, but it retains a connection to the past that is palpable when you step inside. The light falls through the windows just as it did 300 years ago when the building was new. The words of the prayers are the same words that have been spoken here for centuries, linking the present moment to an unbroken chain of devotion that reaches back through time. And beneath the church and around it, the old ones sleep. They do not know about Trafalgar Square or Nelson's column or the tourists who take selfies in front of the fountains. They do not know that the world has changed beyond anything they could have imagined, that the fields they knew have vanished beneath a city of millions. They simply rest as the dead have always rested, patient and silent and eternally still. When you visit this place, if you ever do, you might pause for a moment and think of them. You might offer a silent word of acknowledgement, a nod of respect to those who came before and made this place what it is. You might remember that you, too, will one day join the great company of the dead, your own life absorbed into the flow of history, your own bones perhaps resting beneath some future street or square that you cannot imagine. This is not a morbid thought, but a connecting one. It links us to our ancestors and to our descendants, reminding us that we are part of something larger than ourselves. A story that began long before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. The forgotten dead of St. Martin-in-the-Fields are not truly forgotten. Not as long as someone remembers that they existed, that they lived and loved and hoped just as we do. So remember them now, as you rest in the quiet of this night. Remember the nameless ones, the ordinary ones, the ancestors who sleep beneath Trafalgar Square. They are part of you, in a sense, part of the great human family that spans the ages. Honor them with your remembrance, and then let your own eyes close, joining them for a little while in the peaceful darkness of sleep. Wartime secrets, the underground shelters. Let us move forward now, through the centuries, past the Georgian elegance and the Victorian expansion, past the Edwardian afternoon and the shock of the First World War, until we arrive at a time that still lives in the memory of some who walk the streets of London today. The year is 1940, and the city is at war. Above ground, the familiar landmarks stand defiant against a sky that has become dangerous, a sky that brings not only weather but death, raining down in the form of German bombs that fall night after night, reducing buildings to rubble and lives to memory. This is the Blitz, and it will last for months, reshaping London not only physically but psychologically, forging a spirit of endurance and solidarity that will become part of the city's identity for generations to come. And beneath Trafalgar Square, beneath the stones and bones and buried rivers, a new chapter is being written in the hidden spaces that the 20th century has carved out of the ancient earth. Imagine yourself as a Londoner in that terrible autumn, when the bombs began to fall with a regularity that was almost predictable. The sirens wail in the evening, a rising and falling sound that has become the soundtrack of your life, signaling that the German planes are approaching, that you must leave whatever you are doing and seek shelter. You have learned to recognize the different stages of the alert, to gauge the distance of the explosions, to distinguish between the drone of the bombers and the sharper sound of the anti-aircraft guns defending the city. Where do you go when the sirens sound? If you are lucky, you have an Anderson shelter in your back garden, a corrugated steel structure half buried in the earth, cramped and cold, but offering some protection against anything short of a direct hit. If you live in an apartment building, there may be a basement designated as a shelter, reinforced with timber and sandbags. But for many Londoners, the safest place is underground. In the tunnels and stations of the Tube, the vast network of railways that burrows beneath the city like the roots of a great tree, the stations near Trafalgar Square become shelters for thousands. Charing Cross, just steps from the square, sees crowds of people descending each evening as the light fades and the danger grows. They bring blankets and pillows, sandwiches and thermoses of tea, books and knitting, and anything else that might help pass the long hours of the night. They stake out their spots on the platforms, claiming the same places night after night, creating a kind of community in the depths of the earth. The experience is unlike anything these Londoners have known before. The platforms are crowded, bodies pressed close together, strangers becoming neighbors in the enforced intimacy of the shelters. The air is thick and close, heavy with the smell of thousands of people, the mustiness of the tunnels, the occasional waft of something cooking on a small spirit stove, Children cry, adults murmur. Someone, somewhere, is always coughing or snoring or shuffling about. Sleep is difficult, but exhaustion eventually wins, and people doze in whatever position they can manage, slumped against walls or curled on the hard concrete floor. Above them, the bombs fall. They can hear them, sometimes distant thuds that send vibrations through the earth, reminding them why they are here, why they have given up the comfort of their beds for this underground purgatory. They do not know, in the moment, which buildings are being hit, which streets are being destroyed, whether their own homes will still be standing when morning comes. They can only wait and hope and trust that the earth above them will hold, and the earth does hold, for the most part. The tube tunnels are deep, carved through London's clay, and they offer genuine protection against all but the most powerful bombs. The people who shelter here are safer than those who remain above ground, and they know it. There is fear in the shelters, certainly, but there is also a kind of grim determination, a collective refusal to be broken by the terror raining down from the sky. The authorities initially resisted the use of the tube as shelters. They worried about disease, about disorder, about the railways being disrupted. But the people of London made their own decision, flooding into the stations each evening, forcing the authorities to accept the inevitable. In time, the shelters were organized and improved. Bunk beds were installed, toilets were provided, canteens were set up to serve hot food. What had begun as a desperate improvisation became an established part of wartime life. Imagine yourself there, in that underground world, the ceiling curves above you, tiles reflecting the dim light of the few bulbs that remain on through the night. The tracks are silent, the trains having stopped running hours ago, but you can feel the potential energy of the system, the sense that this is a place of movement and purpose temporarily paused. Around you, the faces of your fellow Londoners are drawn and tired, but also resolute. You are all in this together, sharing the fear and the waiting and the hope that dawn will bring safety. Sometimes, in the quieter moments, you might think about the history of this place, the layers of time that lie beneath and around you. The tube itself is not so old, less than a century in most places, but the earth it passes through has been here forever, or as close to forever as makes no difference. You are sheltering in a space carved out of the same ground that once held hippopotamuses and lions, the same ground where medieval kings kept their hunting hawk, the same ground where generations of the dead were laid to rest in the churchyard of St. Martin. This thought might comfort you, or it might not. It is hard to think about history when the present is so demanding, so frightening, so uncertain. But there is something grounding about the knowledge that this place has endured so much that it has seen empires rise and fall, plagues and fires and countless other catastrophes, and yet it remains. If the earth has survived all of that, perhaps it will survive this too. Perhaps you will survive this too. The night wears on. The bombs continue to fall, sometimes near, sometimes far. Each explosion a reminder of your mortality and your resilience. You doze, you wake, you doze again. The hours blur together, time losing its meaning in the depths of the shelter. And then, finally, the all-clear sounds, that blessed steady note that signals the end of the raid, the return of safety, the permission to climb back up into the world above. You gather your things, stiff and tired, and join the stream of people ascending to the surface. The first light of dawn is breaking as you emerge, gray and pink and impossibly beautiful after the darkness of the night. The air smells of smoke, of brick dust, of the acrid aftermath of explosives. Somewhere, buildings are burning. Somewhere, people are dead. But you are alive, and the city is still standing, and there is work to be done. This is the spirit of the Blitz, the spirit that Churchill spoke of, and that ordinary Londoners embodied night after night, month after month. They did not choose this ordeal, but they faced it with a courage that still inspires, a determination that still resonates. And the shelters beneath Trafalgar Square were part of that story, places of refuge and community, where the people of London waited out the longest nights of their lives. The war ended eventually. The shelters were no longer needed, and the tube returned to its normal function, carrying passengers rather than protecting them. But the memory of those nights lives on, passed down through families and recorded in histories. Part of the rich tapestry of what it means to be a Londoner. And beneath the square, the tunnels remain. They have been modernized and updated, of course, but the basic structure is the same earth surrounding them, the same depth protecting them. If you ride the tube through Charing Cross today, you are passing through a space that once sheltered thousands from the terror of the skies. You are connected to those wartime Londoners, sharing for a moment the underground world that was their refuge. Remember them as you rest tonight. Remember their courage and their fear, their resilience and their hope. Remember that the ground beneath Trafalgar Square has offered protection as well as mystery, that it has sheltered the living as well as the dead. And let that knowledge settle into you like a warm blanket, a reminder that we are all part of the same story, all connected through time and place and the enduring human will to survive. What still waits below have journeyed deep into the hidden history beneath Trafalgar Square, exploring layers of time that stretch from the prehistoric to the present, from the bones of ancient beasts to the shelters of wartime Londoners. We have descended through centuries and risen back again, tracing the stories of those who lived and worked and rested in this remarkable place. But our journey is not quite complete, for there is one truth that must be acknowledged before we return to the surface. We have not found everything. We have not uncovered all the secrets. There is still so much that waits below, unknown and undiscovered. Patient in the darkness. This is the nature of archaeology and of history itself. Every discovery raises new questions. Every answer reveals new mysteries. The earth does not give up its secrets easily or completely. It offers fragments, hints, tantalizing glimpses of what once was. But it always holds something back, reserving its deepest truths for future generations, who will come with new tools and new questions and new ways of seeing. Beneath Trafalgar Square, there are certainly things that have never been found, artifacts from periods we have not discussed, left behind by people whose lives we can only imagine, structures that were built and destroyed long before records were kept, their foundations still intact beneath the modern pavements, fossils from eras we have barely touched upon, creatures that have not yet been named or classified, waiting in the clay for the day when someone's shovel will finally reach them. Consider the sheer complexity of the ground beneath a city as old as London. Every generation has added its own layer, its own contribution to the sediment of human activity. Buildings have risen and fallen. Streets have been laid and torn up. Water mains and gas pipes and electrical cables have been threaded through the earth like nerves through a body. Each of these interventions has disturbed what came before, mixing layers that were once distinct, destroying some evidence while preserving other evidence in unexpected ways. Archaeologists who work in urban environments face challenges that their colleagues in rural areas do not. They must navigate not only the physical complexity of the ground, but the legal and logistical complexity of working in a functioning city. Excavations must be fitted around construction schedules. Access must be negotiated with property owners and utility companies. Time is always limited, and the pressure to complete work before deadlines is immense. Under these conditions, much is inevitably missed, left in the ground for lack of resources to excavate it properly. And yet discoveries continue to be made. Every time a new building goes up near Trafalgar Square, every time a road is repaired or a tunnel is dug, there is a chance that something remarkable will emerge. Workers have found Roman pottery and medieval coins, Georgian medicine bottles and Victorian clay pipes. They have found fragments of buildings that do not appear on any map, evidence of lives that left no other trace. The ground is generous, even when it is not forthcoming, offering gifts to those who are patient enough to receive them. What might still wait below? The possibilities are limited only by imagination and the laws of nature. There could be more bones from the warm periods between ice ages, remains of animals we have not yet discussed or perhaps not yet discovered in Britain at all. There could be artifacts from the earliest human inhabitants of this area, stone tools or traces of fire pits from a time when our ancestors were still learning how to survive in this northern climate. There could be Roman remains, for the Romans certainly knew this area, even if they did not build extensively upon it. There could be Saxon or Viking objects, evidence of the turbulent centuries when London was contested and conquered and rebuilt. Time and again, there could be things we cannot even imagine, objects and structures from periods of history that we understand so poorly that we would not recognize their significance if we found them. History is full of surprises, moments when a chance discovery overturns everything we thought we knew about a place or a people. The ground beneath Trafalgar Square could hold such a surprise, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And there are the lost rivers, still flowing in their buried channels, carrying with them sediment and debris from all across the watershed. Who knows what has been washed into those underground waterways over the centuries? What treasures and trash have accumulated in the places where the flow slows and allows material to settle? The rivers themselves are a kind of archive, a liquid record of everything that has flowed into them since they were first buried beneath the growing city. That this sense of potential, of undiscovered richness, is part of what makes places like Trafalgar Square so fascinating. We can never know everything about them, never exhaust their capacity to surprise and enlighten us. The history is not closed, not finished, not complete. It is ongoing, unfolding, revealing itself in increments as time passes and circumstances change. And this is true not only of the physical remains beneath the ground, but of the stories we tell about them. History is not a fixed thing, not a single narrative that everyone agrees upon. It is a living process of interpretation and reinterpretation. As each generation brings its own questions and concerns to the evidence of the past, the meaning of what lies beneath Trafalgar Square changes as we change, as our understanding of the past evolves, as new methods of analysis become available. What will future generations make of this place? How will they interpret the layers of time that we are only beginning to understand? Perhaps they will have tools we cannot imagine, technologies that can peer into the earth without disturbing it, revealing what lies below in perfect detail. Perhaps they will have questions we have not thought to ask, perspectives we have not considered, insights that will transform our understanding of this spot and its significance. This is a humbling thought, and also an inspiring one. We are not the end of the story, but only its current chapter. We are participants in an ongoing project of discovery and interpretation that will continue long after we are gone. Our role is to do what we can with what we have, to learn what we can learn and share what we know, and then to pass the torch to those who come after us, trusting that they will carry the work forward in ways we cannot foresee. So when you think of what lies beneath Trafalgar Square, think not only of what has been found, but of what still waits to be found. Think of the mysteries that remain unsolved, the questions that remain unanswered, the secrets that the earth has not yet revealed. Let this thought fill you not with frustration, but with wonder, with a sense of the vastness of history and the inexhaustible richness of the places we think we know. The ground beneath your feet, wherever you are, holds its own secrets. Every place has a history, layers of time that reach back further than we can easily comprehend. Trafalgar Square is special because it is famous, because it has been studied and documented and written about for centuries. But in truth, every patch of earth is equally rich, equally mysterious, equally worthy of attention and respect. As you rest tonight, let your mind wander over the landscape of the unknown. Imagine the discoveries that future generations will make, the stories they will tell, the connections they will draw between past and present. Imagine yourself as part of that ongoing project, linked to the archaeologists and historians of the future, just as you are linked to those of the past. We are all explorers in our own way, all seekers after the truth of what lies beneath the surface. And some things, perhaps, are meant to remain hidden, waiting in the darkness for a time when they are ready to be found, when we are ready to receive them. The earth is patient. It has all the time in the world. Closing reflection, sleeping above history, let us return now to where we began, to the surface of Trafalgar Square on a quiet evening when the crowds have thinned and the city has softened into that gentle hush that falls between day and night. You are standing once again in the heart of London. But you are not the same person who stood here at the beginning of our journey. You have traveled through time, descended into the depths of the earth, and emerged with a new understanding of what this place truly is. The sky above you is dark now, or as dark as it ever gets in this city of lights. The stars are faint, dimmed by the glow of street lamps and office buildings. But they are there if you look for them, the same stars that have watched over this place since long before humans existed. The moon, if it is visible, casts a silver light over the square, picking out the details of Nelson's column, the lions at its base, the fountains that have fallen silent for the night. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint smell of rain and the city. that distinctive urban scent that is impossible to describe but immediately recognizable to anyone who has spent time in London. You can hear the distant hum of traffic, the occasional voice of a passerby, the soft cooing of pigeons settling in for the night. These are the sounds of the present, the thin surface layer of this moment in time. But now you know what lies beneath. You know about the bones of hippopotamuses and lions, resting in the ancient gravels where they died hundreds of thousands of years ago. You know about the rivers that once flowed here, now buried beneath the streets, still carrying water through darkness to the sea. You know about the King's Mews, where hawks molted and horses stamped, where grooms rose before dawn to tend the royal animals. You know about the Georgian transformation, the pickaxes and the dreams, the vision of a grand national square rising from the rubble of the old, where generations of ordinary Londoners were laid to rest, their names forgotten but their presence lingering in the earth. You know about the wartime shelters, the underground refuges where families huddled together as bombs fell above, where courage and fear mingled in equal measure through the longest nights. And you know about the mysteries that remain, the discoveries yet to be made, the secrets that the earth has not yet revealed. All of this lies beneath your feet. All of this is part of what Trafalgar Square truly is. Not just a famous landmark or a tourist destination, but a manuscript written over and over again by different hands in different ages, each layer partially obscuring but never completely erasing what came before. This is the gift of history, the gift of knowing that we are not alone in time. We are connected to everyone who has ever stood where we stand, walked where we walk, breathed the air of this place, and felt the ground beneath their feet. They are gone now, those people dissolved into the flow of time, but something of them remains. Their traces linger in the earth, in the stories we tell, in the very fabric of the place itself. And we will be gone too, in time. Our lives will end. Our memories will fade, our names will be forgotten by all but a few. This is the way of things, the natural order that governs all living beings. But something of us will remain, just as something of those who came before remains. We will add our own layer to the sediment of history, our own traces to the record of this place. Future generations will walk above us, just as we walk above the medieval dead, the Georgian builders, the wartime refugees. This need not be a sad thought. It is simply true, and there is a kind of peace in accepting the truth of our place in the grand sweep of time. We are small, yes, individual lives brief against the vastness of history, but we are also part of something larger, something that endures beyond any single life or generation. We belong to the human story, that ongoing narrative of aspiration and failure, creation and destruction, love and loss that has been unfolding since the first humans walked the earth, standing here in Trafalgar Square. You are at the center of that story, at least for this moment. This place has seen so much, held so many lives, witnessed so many chapters of human history, and it will see more. It will hold more lives, witness more chapters, continue to accumulate layers of meaning and memory as long as there are people to give it meaning, to remember what it has been and imagine what it might become. Take a moment now to breathe deeply, to feel the air filling your lungs, to sense the solid ground beneath your feet. You are alive, here, now, connected to everything that has come before and everything that will come after. This is a precious thing, a miraculous thing, this brief window of consciousness in the vast darkness of eternity. Do not take it for granted. Do not let it slip past unnoticed. Savor it, honor it, be grateful for it, and when you are ready, let your eyes close. Let your thoughts slow and settle, like sediment drifting down through still water. Let the noise of the world fade into the background, replaced by the quiet murmur of your own breath, the gentle rhythm of your own heart. You are safe here, held by the earth that has held so many before you, resting in the same place where the hippopotamus once rested, where the medieval parishioner once prayed, where the wartime family once waited for dawn. Sleep now, knowing that you are part of the story. Sleep above the bones and rivers, the foundations and fossils, the secrets and mysteries that lie beneath Trafalgar Square. They will keep their vigil while you rest, patient and silent as they have always been, waiting for the morning when the sun will rise again over this ancient, ever-changing place. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the hidden history beneath one of the world's most famous squares. I hope the stories we have explored together have been soothing, that they have carried you gently from the bustle of the waking world into the quiet realms of rest and dreams. History is a comfort, I think, a reminder that we are not alone, that we are part of something larger and more enduring than ourselves. If you have enjoyed this journey, if it has helped you find peace in the quiet hours of the night, I hope you will return for another story, another exploration of the hidden depths that lie beneath the places we think we know. There are so many stories waiting to be told, so many layers of time waiting to be revealed, and I would be honored to share them with you, to be your guide through the gentle darkness of sleepy history. Until then, rest well, dream deeply, and know that wherever you are, whatever ground you rest upon, there is history beneath you, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be remembered, patient and kind and endlessly fascinating. Good night.